Tonight, U.S. soldiers relieved of duty in El Salvador for taking part in combat operations. The Nazi called the Butcher of Lyon returns to France. There are charges he was a paid informant for the United States. And our Computer Future series looks at confusion over those new microcomputers. Good evening. I'm Jessica Savage, and this is NBC Nightly News. Klaus Barbie, Nazi war criminal known as the Butcher of Lyon, is back in France tonight. He was expelled by Bolivia last night, hustled from his jail cell under a blanket, and flown to France. At the airport in Lyon, police arrested the daughter of a concentration camp victim. She was carrying a rifle. Jim Bitterman reports.
Klaus Barbie, the man they called the Butcher of Lyon, was brought back under wraps tonight to the French city where he earned his reputation. Tonight, under heavy security, Barbie was taken to Montluc prison in Lyon, the same prison where 40 years ago, the ex-Gestapo officer was not a prisoner, but Hitler's man in charge. The 69-year-old Barbie had been living in exile in Bolivia, protected by the government there until yesterday, when he was expelled to French Guiana, and where French officials had the authority to arrest and charge him with crimes against humanity. During World War II, Barbie was head of the Gestapo in Lyon, France. He's blamed for the deaths and deportations of thousands of French Jews and resistance fighters. His most well-known victim, the head of French resistance, who was tortured until he died. But there are many here still alive who remember well Barbie's crimes. Lise Lesevre was crippled for life by his torture. Her husband was deported by Barbie. He never came back from the death camps. For the past 11 years, Nazi hunters Serge and Beata Klarsfeld have been trying to bring Barbie back from Bolivia for trial.
We were not surprised, but there is always a surprise when a long story comes to an end and when it is a happy end.
I think this trial for this reason will extremely be important because it will be trial based on documents and showing the work and the crimes committed by the political police.
The preparation for a trial of the ex-Nazi could take as much as a year. It also could turn into a considerable political spectacle, since Barbie has always threatened that if he were ever brought to trial, he would tell what he knows about Nazi collaboration with French officials, some of whom are still in public positions today. For those of his victims still alive, though, the trial of Klaus Barbie cannot come soon enough. Jim Bitterman, NBC News, Paris.
There's a professor at Wayne State University in Detroit who says he was a U.S. counterintelligence officer in Germany in 1948 and worked with Barbie. Erhard Debringhaus says Barbie was a paid informant. The U.S. paid him for information on Nazis, and he says those payments made possible Barbie's flight to South America. Debringhaus, at his home near Detroit today, recalled those post-war years. He talked of Barbie's work for U.S. intelligence and of Barbie's war crimes.
This guy was after all the resistance. He was primarily fighting the underground in France. He'd caught hundreds of them, and if they didn't talk or cooperate with him, he would string them up on their thumbs in the basement until they were dead. And he said there's a mass grave outside of his headquarters that must have 200 people in it. On 2 occasions, 2 agents of the French government, of the Sûreté Deuxième Bureau, they called that at that time, I don't know whether it's still the same, came to me and to be interrogated by them as to the whereabouts of Klaus Barbie. They had heard that we knew something about him. And I was ordered by my own headquarters to not to say anything that we knew anything about him.
Every day, thousands of executives are faced with having to be in 2 places at once. That's why the Bell system figured out a way to do just that. The concept of teleconferencing.
Anything's possible.
Using the most powerful communication network in the world, the Bell network, teleconferencing lets you communicate over thousands of miles.
Let's sign.
Face to face.
What about Seattle?
They're on it.
And back to back.
Tell them the good news. See you later.
The teleconferencing concept from the Bell system, expanding your ability to communicate.
Mrs. Conklin taught us much more than the 3 R's. She taught us about planning for the future. Maybe that's why so many of us open tax-deferred IRAs at our credit unions. They make it easier to save for IRAs through payroll deduction. And credit unions are supported by a national system with over $85 billion. Credit Union IRAs.
Oh, Jimmy Secret!
America's credit union.
Over 40 million strong.
3 U.S. Army advisors today were ordered home from El Salvador. There were 2 separate incidents, both involving helicopters, and both in violation of U.S. rules prohibiting advisors from entering combat operations. Don Molina reports from El Salvador.
The American advisors were involved in 2 separate helicopter missions near this bridge last Wednesday morning. One of the 2 missions has only been described as a combat operation. Much more is known about the other mission, the one during which Staff Sergeant Jay Stanley was wounded. The bridge, known as Puente Cuscatlan, is the site of a communications relay point for combat troops in the area. Nearby is the town of Berlin, which at the time was being held by guerrillas. The relay station had broken down. Some of the Salvadoran troops couldn't receive field instructions. The helicopter, with Sergeant Stanley on board, was sent to the site of the broken relay. The point of initial confusion was whether the mission was to fix the relay or whether the helicopter itself, hovering overhead with its antenna, actually became the relay. The answer now from the U.S. Embassy is that the helicopter was itself relaying field instructions and so was involved in an operational mission. Sergeant Stanley was not relieved, but his team leader and 2 others were.
The remaining question is whether the Americans were caught in a situation where Salvadoran pilots were giving the orders during a mission and they had to cooperate. An official source says if that had been the case, they probably wouldn't have been relieved. Dan Molina, NBC News, San Salvador.
In Washington, there was some uncertainty expressed over whether that helicopter trip was an actual combat flight. Bernard Kalb reports from the State Department.
Administration officials say they will have no comment while an investigation is underway. But the incident is expected to escalate the controversy on Capitol Hill over administration policy toward El Salvador. Some Democrats have been sharply critical of that policy, but one reaction today indicated that the incident would not undercut the support of Republican Senator Lugar of Indiana.
Well, for 2 years, the American advisors have been there. Never have they been safe. But as a matter of fact, they have not been wounded, they have not been killed, and they have done the things they were supposed to do, that is, training missions. Clearly, our credibility comes from the fact that this cannot be tolerated, and the people involved in ordering those people to go into those missions have been disciplined as they ought to be.
Today's report from the U.S. Embassy in El Salvador contrasts sharply with the official report here at the State Department Thursday. The embassy says the flight on which Sergeant Stanley was wounded was operational, but the State Department, on the basis of initial reports, put it differently Thursday. The spokesman saying that the pilot of the helicopter on which Sergeant Stanley was riding noticed traffic backed up on the Pan American Highway and decided to check out the situation, and the helicopter came under fire. And answering questions about Sergeant Stanley, these comments.
Well, he was not participating in any combat situation.
The incident comes at an extremely awkward time for the administration, just as it is trying to win congressional approval for the Fiscal 84 request for military aid and economic support for El Salvador, a total of $205 million. Bernard Kalb, NBC News, the State Department.
Cambodian Prince Sihanouk appealed for U.S. military aid today, indirectly. Instead of asking for troops, the prince said he wants weapons, money, and military training to fight the Vietnamese communists occupying Cambodia. At least 20 people were killed and another 109 injured when a car bomb blew up outside the main PLO office in Beirut early today. NBC's Vic Aiken reports from Beirut.
The car bomb, possibly one of the most destructive weapons. Certainly the most sinister. The device was planted here, a heavily populated area of downtown Beirut, next to this apartment building, which also houses the Palestine Research Center and the Libyan news agency. But bombs kill and maim anyone within range, not just those who might be targets. Some wounded staggered out of the wreckage. Others were helped. And there were those who were beyond help.
This is the second car bomb in the exact same location during the past 4 months, except this one was far more devastating.
Frantic relatives were forcibly held back from rushing into the devastation. French troops from the multinational force moved in to help as local police fired into the air to keep away the curious. There has been so much violence for so long in Lebanon that memories of individual horrors fade fairly fast. But just when it seems people start to feel safe, there is another terrible reminder that this country is still not at peace. Vic Aiken, NBC News, Beirut.
You won't believe your eyes. The snappy new cannons are here. Cannon crisp, cannon clear. A snap to use, each shot a prize. You won't believe your eyes. Canon quality photography. And the price, a nice surprise. The snappy new cannons are here. 35 millimeter. Crisp and clear. You're in for a snappy surprise. You won't believe your eyes.
Hi, Ernie. Good to have you back. Here we come.
Sentry Insurance knows that sometimes it takes more to get an injured worker back on his feet than just footing his medical bills. And Sentry is big enough to do more. Sentry can provide for physical therapy, even job retraining if it's needed, to get a worker back where he belongs.
Ernie, you look terrific.
All's well. With Sentry, you know all's well.
Lloyd Nolan for Super Polygrip.
I've used Super Polygrip for 5 years now. I don't need this script.
Cut. But Lloyd...
Listen, it's murder when you get seeds stuck under your dentures like this. Ouch! Now watch Super Polygrip. It helps form a seal between your dentures and gums.
Occlusive seal, Lloyd.
Helps keep food out, dentures in. Simple.
Extra holding formula.
The packet says that. Super Polygrip helps keep food out, dentures in.
More violence on this nation's roads. It's the 6th day of the trucker anger over high road use and fuel taxes. In Washington, Senator Bob Dole ordered a study of the economic impact of the new taxes on truckers, but he warned that Congress will not be intimidated by the violence and that he will sponsor legislation against it. In North Carolina, National Guard helicopters were ordered to keep highways safe for the trucks still running. 17 shooting deaths there and 17 dead there. 17 deaths on the highway. Another big trouble spot, Pennsylvania. Fred Briggs reports on that.
Truck traffic is always much lighter on weekends. Still, it was about half the normal Saturday traffic on the Pennsylvania Turnpike today, and those who did drive wanted to reach their destinations before dark.
You just can't run at night. If you run at night, you're taking your life in your hands.
Last night in Pennsylvania, 10 trucks were damaged, 4 truckers threatened, and 3 people arrested, according to state police.
Seems to be no pattern whatsoever. It's sporadic violence against whatever truck is on the road.
The National Guard was still on alert today at armories, on alert, but not called out as yet. Truck stops are having hard times. The customers are few for diesel fuel or coffee. 3 independent truckers on strike reflected on this.
Everybody in general is affected by the new tax bill, right?
He means company drivers and the companies, too.
So they're either going to have to lay this man off, or so many drivers, in order to cover the tax, or they're just going to simply go out of business.
I think we're going to wind up with nothing.
Those still driving do so with their eyes on the overpasses and ears on their CB radios on roads that have little romance. Fred Briggs, NBC News, Pittsburgh.
In Miami, the FBI has arrested Demetrius Papandakos. Agents say he planned and led the biggest cash theft in American history, last December's $11 million heist at Sentry Armored Car Courier in New York. A federal jury in Houston today declared former CIA agent Edwin Wilson guilty of charges. He smuggled 21 tons of explosives into Libya in 1977. It's his second conviction. The first last year was for gun running. For the first time, President Reagan used the word Reaganomics. In his weekly radio address today, the president said it sounds like a fad diet or maybe an aerobic exercise, but it is working. Many Democrats disagree on that, as David Rush reports from the White House.
Characterizing today's address from Camp David as equal time, the president voiced a strong defense of his recovery program. and for the first time he used the term Reaganomics.
With every anchor man in the evening news, a goodly share of political pundits, and more than a few politicos using it, it has a good chance of becoming standard Americana. I wonder if they'll still use that name when they found out it works.
At the Democratic National Committee's winter meeting in Washington, Senator Edward Kennedy vigorously attacked the president's policies.
Mr. Reagan says that unemployment can be solved if only every business hires one extra worker. And in 1984, we will reply that unemployment can be solved only if this nation fires one incumbent president.
The Democrats made clear they won't let up pressure to change the Reagan program to their liking, including enactment of an emergency jobs program. But the president sees the lower unemployment rate, coupled with other economic indicators, as giving him increased political strength to counter opposition to Reaganomics. David Rush, NBC News at the White House.
First results from the George Shultz trip to China, a summit meeting this year. That and more when we return.
You're on in 2 minutes, Linda. I can't. Oh, this is itching. Has anyone got one of those cortisone creams? They can't stop itching like Lanacane.
Lanacane has what costly hydrocortisones like Cortate don't have. 2 active ingredients that work to stop painful itching fast, and an antibacterial to help natural healing.
Itching's gone. Lanacane's fast. You can trust Lanacane every time.
No hydrocortisone stops itching like Lanacane.
New ideas have now come together that advance the state-of-the-art in home heating, creating a new generation of high-technology gas heating systems, so efficient they can cut your fuel consumption by 1/3. They help make gas the fuel of the future, an even better value today. Because the future belongs to the efficient.
The new money market accounts at your bank pay high money market rates.
So does our money market fund.
The new money market accounts also give you easy access to your money.
So does our money market fund.
But unlike a money market fund, ours is federally insured.
Introducing insured money market accounts from America's banks for security with no ifs.
The White House said today that the Premier of China, Zhao Ziyang, will meet President Reagan in the United States sometime this year. The summit meeting was arranged by Secretary of State George Shultz, now in China. Shultz said he too will meet the Chinese again to work on trade, textiles, and Taiwan issues. Jack Reynolds reports from Peking.
The trip seems to have gone better than expected. One indication, today's People's Daily, China's largest newspaper, featured 2 pictures of the secretary. But there was also a front-page article highlighting remarks made by Premier Zhao Ziyang at a news conference yesterday when he said that Taiwan was still the biggest obstacle in Sino-U.S. relations.
Secretary Shultz is visiting a China that's going through enormous changes. But the Chinese disappointment in the U.S. relationship is that they had hoped with American help those changes would come faster.
China has over 1 billion people. It's a poor country. The leadership, in an abrupt change from the philosophy of Mao Zedong, is emphasizing a better life for the average Chinese. Peking had hoped that American trade, technology, and investment would accelerate this process. Thus far, it's not been what Peking expected. China currently has a sizable trade deficit with the U.S. One industry they hoped would change that is textiles. But the Americans are holding Chinese textile imports to previous levels. And as a signal of their displeasure, the Chinese have stopped buying some American products. It would have been impossible to solve all of these problems during the trip, but enough progress was made here by Mr. Shultz to set the stage for a summit meeting between Premier Zhao Ziyang and President Reagan. Chinese sources here say that that meeting will probably take place in Washington in September. Jack Reynolds, NBC News, Peking.
Vice President and Mrs. George Bush flew to the West German-Czechoslovakia border today. They spent time with troops of the 2nd Armored Cavalry Division who guard the east-west border there. And later, Bush left Germany and flew to Rome. The Nuclear Freeze Movement opened its 3rd annual convention in St. Louis today. The movement has grown quite a bit. 8 states passed a nuclear freeze resolution since last fall. Now, as Bob Abernathy reports from St. Louis, the group is looking forward to the future.
Delegates here from 43 states are celebrating how far they say the freeze movement has come and debating where it should go next. They all agree the first target is a second try next month at passage of a freeze resolution in the House of Representatives. But beyond that, there's division about cutting off money for new weapons. Some here want the U.S. to do this, even if the Soviets do not. There's no argument, however, about the freeze and the election of 1984.
We cannot stop the nuclear arms race under President Reagan. Unfortunately, he's not smart enough to do that. That doesn't mean that we can't stop the nuclear arms race. We can and must elect a new government, a new administration, and a new Congress.
Any serious candidate for public office at the national level, at least, in 1984, has absolutely no choice but to support a freeze or face certain defeat.
Outside, a few Ku Klux Klan pickets, a reminder of other controversies, as was freeze supporter Daniel Ellsberg of the Pentagon Papers.
The only chain that a man can stand is the chain of a hand in hand.
Inside, too, echoes of other movements as these new abolitionists dream of banning both the bomb and war itself. Bob Abernathy, NBC News, St. Louis.
And when we return, our computer future, the beginning of a special 8-part report.
Computer confusion. Coming up next on NBC Nightly News.
When hands get cold, then hot, they can crack. Winter cold and winter heat can make your skin rough, dry, even cracked. That's why Vaseline Dermatology Formula Lotion was developed with dermatologists, tested by dermatologists, and recommended by 9 out of 10 dermatologists surveyed. It relieves every major dry skin symptom, even cracking. Don't let winter get under your skin. Get Vaseline Dermatology Formula.
There's more to John Hancock than life insurance.
A good lawyer has to examine all the evidence before planning a strategy. The John Hancock companies do this too, by offering all sorts of ways to help people like me manage their money. Everything from tax planning to IRAs, even money market funds. The way I see it, you can't make a stronger case for good financial planning than John Hancock.
John Hancock. We can help you here and now, not just hereafter.
Get a feel for cotton. It's what you like in towels because it gets you really dry and stays so fresh looking and feels so good against your skin. Once you get a feel for cotton, you won't feel like anything else. Look for the cotton seal on these Luxor towels by Martex. All cotton in lots of colors.
Computers, they're all over these days, at work, in schools, at home. On Saturdays and Sundays throughout February, we'll be looking at how computers are affecting our lives. We're calling the series Our Computer Future. Tonight, computer confusion. In our first report, Frank Burkholzer tells why people are buying computers and how manufacturers are now trying to sell them.
When we say this is a personal computer, how personal? Toni Corwin and her husband Bruce have their personal Apple in their personal bedroom. Veronica Sved takes her personal portable Epson everywhere, including the UCLA cafeteria. Elizabeth Ferrarini's personal Matra terminal is her link to thousands of eligible men through a national electronic bulletin board. It's done such wonders for her personal love life, she's writing a book.
Look, this is electronic lust. It's hot. It's lots and lots of hot connections. It really is. It's great.
These are 3 of the several million activists in the personal computer revolution, a phenomenon of technology and of mass marketing. The introduction of a new computer model has become a major event.
It's not just another personal computer.
Frequently accompanied by extravagant claims of how the new machine makes all others obsolete. And yet the truth is that almost any computer, new or old, cheap or costly, is capable of doing far more than its owner usually is capable of asking it to do. Ed Siebenthal can organize his income tax data on a creaky old Model 1 Radio Shack computer that uses, however, the same highly sophisticated electronic spreadsheet called VisiCalc that the fanciest machines employ. Malcolm Smith was able to use a bottom-of-the-line VIC-20 to build a professional inventory control system for a music store owner in Beckley, West Virginia. Scientist Henry Harris at Jet Propulsion Laboratory in Pasadena programmed a little Apple computer to monitor and control an important radar experiment on the Space Shuttle Columbia as it was performed out in space. It is this kind of power that makes people want computers. Manufacturers can't crank them out fast enough. 2 million last year, probably 3 million or more this year. By 1990, at least 20 million in business, education, and in homes. Astonishing? Not to the man who gave little computers access to mass data storage, Gary Kildall.
That was a time when it was really clear that, hey, this little computer system can do all sorts of neat things. You can store text, you can change text, you can write programs, and it's almost as fast as a mini computer, and it doesn't cost very much. And those things, all those ingredients together, said, you know, it was real clear there's going to be a whole big revolution in how people approach computers.
It may have taken a little longer than Gary Kildall thought it would, but the market is here now. And the market is us. And the salesmen are out to find us in full cry.
But which one's right for you? These?
Apple.
The Timex brings
The Commodore 64.
The IBM
What nobody else can.
The TRS-80 color computer.
home computer from Texas.
Save $100 on the TRS-80 color computer.
Your own.
We hear them, but can we believe them? Frank Burkholzer, NBC News, Los Angeles.
Our computer future continues on Nightly News with Chris Wallace tomorrow night. The subject, the computer classroom. Parents and teachers across the country are arguing over computer education. That's tomorrow. In future reports, computers taking American jobs and moving them overseas, artificial intelligence, and how computers are changing our political system. And that is our report tonight. Senator Alan Cranston is tomorrow's guest on Meet the Press. I'm Jessica Savage. From New York, thank you. And good night from all of us at NBC News.
Saturday, look who's back.
Monster Eunice is here!
Carol Burnett guest stars on Mama's Family. Then after Taxi, it's the acclaimed new drama series, The Family Tree. The New York Daily News calls it a winner. The LA Herald Examiner states great television.
There ain't nothing better Saturday.
Coming up on the scene at 6, a man and his daughter